speakers are Laura and Brendan, and our next talk is going to be the trials and tribulations of Agile adoption.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Brendan Farrell. I'm a software engineering manager with Red Hat Mobile based in Waterford, Ireland.
Hi everyone, my name is Fitzgerald. I was an engineer on the mobile team from where I changed to being an Agile Practitioner or Scrum Master in the same team.
Okay, for this afternoon we're going to talk about the trials and tribulations of Agile adoption. The good bits, the bad bits, what stops in its tracks, and the challenges that it faced. So, a quick look at the agenda. First up, where Agile met Waterfall and the conflicts that arose. Then we're going to look at the people and the challenge to bring them through an Agile adoption. The 7 deadly sins that we committed on that road. Moving too fast. Why didn't we stop, look and listen at times? And finally, the next phase, the challenges that we face going forward. This is just a quick timeline event, just to put some context on it. So 2012, we started to implement Agile. 2014, we were acquired by Red Hat. Just became Red Hat Mobile. 2015, we had pull request hell, as we like to call it. 2016, we hired more engineers, but we were in our ivory tower phase. We hired a business system analyst, which might seem mad in the Agile world, but we get to that. We had automation and tooling investment. And finally, today we have new teams and we have our first dedicated Agile practitioner. So, Red Hat Mobile Application, as I said, was formerly a startup company acquired by Red Hat, known as Feed Henry. We were an Agile team with regular releases every few days to customers. Red Hat at the same time had a strong history of long-running on-prem, self-managed solutions, usually taking 6 to 24 months for a release cycle. This included rigid security and rigid compliance work, a typical waterfall approach. RHMap was the first SaaS product in Red Hat, releasing monthly. So what typically happened is we had a month of engineering, we threw it over to our QE friends, they took it for 3 or 4 months, stabilized it, make sure it was ready to be pushed out, gave it to ops once they signed off on it, and we deployed it to all our grids around the world. So straight away you can see what's going to happen. We have an Agile versus Waterfall conflict. And how do we manage that? Because no matter what way we looked at it, our project management team, business units, sales and product still worked in a very Waterfall manner. So this is what happened. We had a misalignment way of working, miscommunication, conflict, misuse of resources, everything that comes with it. But we were Agile, so we thought we were right anyway. Waterfall to us was the old man of the methodology world. We were the young kids on the block. So, not quite as dramatic as the slide portrays, but we had House of Agile versus House of Waterfall. As I said, the young versus the traditionalists. We did have, next slide, sorry. We actually lived on our ivory tower at this stage. We thought we were so cool with Agile that we could do no wrong. We were going around in our manly suits, Gucci shoes. We were brilliant. Agile was great. Waterfall was nothing to us. But this is a slide that many of you might have come across before. It's from Matthew Side's book, Black Box Thinking. And what it was a senior official asked his ground crew to mark the bullet holes from all the planes that returned from battle. When that happened, he stood up at a meeting and he spoke out and he said, this is the data that we collected. This is where we're going to strengthen our planes to make them safer. But one lone voice stood up and said, we're reading this data wrong. And they asked, what do you mean we're reading it wrong? We're not looking at the planes that didn't come back. If we look at the planes that didn't come back, it means we should be strengthening the 2 engines, the cockpit, and the rear gunner's position. That was our problem. We didn't read our own data. We didn't look at it in any great depth. We looked at it from a very high level. And in reality, this is what we had. This is actually better than the hotel I'm staying in, by the way. We needed some tough love, some care and attention. We still had a solid house. So the Red Hat Agile house was still in good nick, but we needed to do some work on it. It wasn't the ivory tower that we perceived. So the trials that we faced. First up, peopleware. We all know hardware and software are easy. Hardware breaks down, we replace it, we buy a new piece, or repair it. Software, write a new piece of code. But with people, you can't do that. There's no on and off switch. And every one of us is individuals. You're dealing with a person on a person-by-person basis. And then you have them working in a legacy system. They might be there for a long time. Their system, their way, their job. And when you start imposing a new methodology on them, they perceive you're taking their power. You're taking their job, their way, thinking away from them. So straight away they're in a defensive position. And you've got to try and manage that. The other people we always need to convince are senior management. The people that sign off on these things, they're going to ask us questions. Is it worth taking Laura off an engineering team and creating a full Agile practitioner? Does it make financial sense? Will it affect our releases? How does it impinge on the team? So these are all very relevant questions and ones that always have to be answered. That's me begging the CTO for another Agile practitioner because I have too many hats at this stage. Another challenge we had was product direction. Being a startup company, historically, one voice ruled them all. It could be your CEO, your CT, it could be anybody, but usually the person that shouted loudest. And when that happens it intimidates the team. And it makes it very hard for an open and well-structured discussion. And what's happening there is that you're not using everybody's technical know-how. They're going back to their desk, sitting down, they don't want to put their head above the parapet and get shouted at. So we end up with one person driving that technology, which might always be right. And in turn, that introduces technical debt. And technical debt, as we all know, costs us and bites us much further down the road, trying to manage it and trying to fix it. So it was a huge challenge, politically and emotional, for us with all our Agile implementation. And if we didn't handle it correctly, we were going to have fallout. Okay, when we talk about project management, we're including the people I just mentioned before, sales units, sales teams, business units, product, and our favourite friend, the project manager. They always track individuals at a percentage level. So they take out their spreadsheet and look and divide up where everybody's going, hour by hour basis nearly. They view people as a resource. And an example of this is John has the skill set for Project A, but he also has a skill set for Project B. So let's put 50% of his time against both of those and let's see what happens. But we know from research that's a fallacy. We only get 33% in A and 33% in B, so we've lost 33%. The other thing is, being viewed as a resource, people find it demeaning. So straight away we have a conflict. The other thing that they often look to do was agree a project plan before we had any analysis done, any spiking. Now we use a traffic light system, so constantly we have releases in the red, and it makes us outwardly look bad on our releases. But we're given these fictitious dates without any real facts to back them up. So it's a challenge. So we've all come across the product requirement documents. They run to hundreds and hundreds of pages. To them, it's their master plan, it's their Bible. If it's not in there, you can't do it. If it's in there, you have to do it. It's very structured. There's no movement around it at all. And this then fed into the test plan. And I'm looking at a few QE lads in the building. What happened with this was the test plan was derived from that same PRD. And when that happens is you get gaps in your test plan. Because you're on a project that's 6 or 9 months long. We all know technology moves very fast. So we haven't covered all the bases if we stringently stick to that test plan and that PRD document. So we tried to redress the balance, and we chose 4 specific places that we wanted to redress it in and see what happened. One of them was their magical spreadsheet. So they'd have this spreadsheet with all the people on it, and they would apply hours, take them 100%, fill it up all the time. What we did was gave them our spreadsheet, which was only 8% of the capacity. We kept 20% back for, at that time, typically for Scrum events and Agile training. We also changed the perception of being focused 100% on the product. What that meant was, if we wanted to do some automation, tooling, technical debt, anything like that we want to address, that it was for the betterment of the project, and the product. So even though we weren't actually working on the product at the time, it was always for the betterment. The second act was one which neither myself or Laura were there for, and I'm sort of glad. They actually shut down product development for 6 weeks. 50 engineers for 30 days. Colossal resource to shut down for that long. Escalated through different management levels in Red Hat, quite high. Eventually they realised it was the best thing to do. What it did was it helped us address that technical debt and better stabilise and consolidate our platform at the time, which, you know, when you're in a startup company, you're running to the next month. So our platform is designed there. You're trying to get the next wage bill paid. You're trying to get X, Y, and Z paid. So you're doing what has to be done to get there, and not always in, you know, the most perfect sense. You're doing what needs to be done, held together with sticky tape, plasters, blue tack, whatever. So we needed time out, and a single sprint with a few people wasn't going to do it. So we took those 6 weeks with the 50 engineers, and we constantly worked on that. The other thing we did was redefine the relationship of 60-20-20 relationship. So in products, 80%, 60% was assigned for product, 20% was technical, because we were still going to have to work on technical debt. We're still working on it today. And the other 20%, upskilling and community. The third of the 4 acts, we stopped resourcing at an individual level. No longer could they come to us and say they want Nick, Sean, John, whoever. They had to work with teams. It made it much easier for us to manage and much better in an agile world. We stopped investing huge amount of time in PRDs. The asterisk means we are still using PRDs today, and I'll explain why, but very, very lightweight. I've added in the fact that we hired a BSA at this stage, but just to clarify, it was actually 2017, January, that he started. Why did we hire a BSA in an agile world? Because we had to have an intermediate, if you like, between the agile and the waterfall world. He was able to explain to the business unit what our technical needs were. He was able to explain to us what the business unit's needs were. Some say actually, you know, he worked like a UN peacekeeper, but it wasn't quite that bad. And it's been very, very successful for us to date, because with him, we looked at 6 PRDs and we binned them. So we didn't waste resources on them. You know, we're still looked upon as a bit strange having a waterfall role in an agile model, but it has worked. The one that's worked really well, QE became one with the engineering team. So when we look at our Scrum teams now, it's just team members. We don't differentiate between a developer and a QE engineer anymore. They both do bits of everything at the moment. It's a pure cross-functional Scrum adoption for that team. No longer do we produce engineering works. At the end of it, throw it over the wall to QE and hope for the best. Those days are gone. They're with us from day one. They're involved in drawing up the architecture, the product plans. If they need to be there for the PRDs, they're there. So they're one with us at all stages. So what happened? We reverted to type. We lost the 60-20-20 battle. Went to 95-5. I believe it went to 100-0 at times, because we couldn't turn our back on a customer. We were still reverting to type, to that startup mentality where the next bit of money was coming in. We hadn't grasped quite what we could do within Red Hat. We didn't understand that we could actually say no to that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand if there was no benefit outside that single customer. We hadn't quite understood that we couldn't make custom products. It's only in the last year that we realised, you know what, we have to make a product that can be sold to multiples, not to one person. So that also created a huge pushback on deprecation of broken or longer user features. For the exact same reason, we just couldn't make that best decision, because again, it was down to the single customer. You know, that guy's been with us since we started out 10 years ago as a startup company. We've got to keep him happy. But at the end of the day, he's actually going to cost us money. So we need to be able to say no. And if we lose him, we lose him. We lost some staff members. They were a little bit uncomfortable with our new approach. They were all very exposed. Agile doesn't let anybody hide in the weeds. So some people were sitting there for years in the niche markets. You know, maybe a QA engineer just doing happy paths, and all of a sudden he's asked to do automation. He doesn't have the technical ability to do it, so he moved on. We were lucky we didn't lose that many, but we did lose some.
So now we're going to talk about the phase of the journey that our Agile coach lovingly calls the 7 deadly sins. So we had, at the time, we broke out to 7 teams, we had 7 streams and 7 backlogs. We did this because historically we have well-defined areas within the product. They were disconnected, and each team was associated with each one of these. We also scaled our Scrum processes out to these 7 teams, even though we didn't have we had 5 QEs, so we didn't have enough to support it. We still managed to scale it out. Each team managed its own backlog, had its own view of the world, and probably a little siloed. So some of the issues we faced with that, each of the backlogs had their own technical initiative, bugs, features, and some community-facing initiatives. So there was a challenge there with managing team expectation. So some of the teams were working on product-facing initiatives, other teams worked on community, and some teams had more flexibility than others. So this created the perception that there was like some cool teams having fun, and then there was some other teams that were like keeping the lights on, you know, working all hours to keep everything up and going. So that was something that had to be managed. As we became more agile, this idea of, you know, agile, it's very flexible, you can do what you want, that kind of creeped in. So there was a little bit of effort in trying to manage that as well. As Brendan mentioned, the product team were quite aggressive in the product roadmap. They saw 7 teams, and that was an opportunity to drive 7 different features. Again, slightly siloed. And the roadmaps became quite long, so we were promising things like really far into the future. And we weren't questioning the value of these things. So in some cases, we ended up in situations where we had developed things that hadn't been questioned, and maybe no one actually wanted the feature. Again, as we became more agile, this became like the badge of pride. We're like the cool kids. We can, you know, you want a feature, we'll get it for you. We'll get it done. So we didn't want to say no, and we definitely convinced ourselves it was working. We had stats to back that up. So, for example, Brendan mentioned about bringing the QE team into the development team. So before we made all these changes, we had only 6% of tickets were going through verification and QE within the sprint. And after the change in the teams, there was 96% were being verified and QA'd within the context of the sprint. So we could see that in the stats. We could see it from what we were getting in JIRA. So this looked really, like, outwardly really good. The teams were really happy, and we were becoming more agile, more open, and people were starting to feel, developers were feeling like they had more autonomy and could kind of choose what and how they were doing things a little bit more. This also helped with management as well. So outwardly everything looked really good, and we could say, yeah, you know, we're leading the way, we're doing all this agile stuff, the team is doing really well. So that was definitely a sense of pride for the team. So because of that, we wanted to keep moving, we wanted to keep innovating, and we wanted to keep improving on our processes. We looked at a lot of large-scale Scrum and small-scale Scrum as well. We had some teams that weren't working from the product backlog, but for example, we have a sustaining team which was dealing with bugs, so a lot of their work wasn't coming from the product route, it was coming through our support team, so Kanban suited that a lot better than Scrum. So the lust to succeed, as it says on the slide, you know, you want to just keep going, you want to keep improving, but you have to also look at the imperfections that are there. That's very hard to do when you're in a transition where things are looking outwardly really well. So Wrath, this is a good one. So as Brendan mentioned, product were very much in a waterfall methodology. The team were in Agile. So as you can imagine, this didn't marry very well. It led to some fun conversations. The support and consultancy, we had some issues where they were like bypassing the process, so they're in the same place as us, or you know, you get a ping. So even though we had the team there, the product was moving on, and this led to like directly going to specific team members rather than through the proper channels. So yeah, all these issues led to like some mistakes that we made. At the time, we had a product team, but we didn't have a product owner in the Scrum sense. So that wasn't defined, the engineering management team sort of had to fulfill that role and put on a lot of hats, switch those hats regularly throughout the day, and that kind of made it difficult to have like a neutral view and not be conflicted with other things going on. As there were 7 teams, there was work created. So again, the product roadmap, let's get some stuff developed, let's get features out. We have 7 teams, let's have them working on stuff all the time. And then at this point, we failed to hold a retrospective. So I'll talk about this a bit later as well. The retrospective is really important. So this kind of phase is around the 2016 time in the timeline. So at that point, being critical of ourselves was difficult because of the fact that there were changes that we were making that were going quite well. But the retrospective part is really, really important, and I'll talk about that later in the timeline. A little bit later, but we'll move back to next moment.
So we were moving too fast, as Laura alluded to. On perception, outwardly, everything was working well for us, and we were running and running and running. Some of the issues that caused. We grew from a relatively small 27, 28 size engineering team to 50 in the space of 12 months. That's a massive growth spurt, I should say. It takes a lot of work to upskill all those people and get them up to speed on all your agile processes, as well as the very large platform that we had. So all of a sudden we have all these people contributing tickets to JIRA, PRDs, code, lots of codes going into our Git, everything. The JIRA tickets were just ballooning out of control at this stage. There was no control of them. Come to me and you've got an issue, don't talk to me, create a ticket in JIRA. It was our one source of truth. Everything went there. Problem was it wasn't being managed properly. But our overall speed increased by an order of magnitude, and our quality actually increased. So outwardly, we looked very successful. We were flying through work, and everything was great. But behind the scenes, there was issues. One of them was backlog overload. We never ever set expectations on ticket fulfillment. How long they would last, what would happen if they were there for more than 3 months, who to talk to, who to set fixed versions for, was the labelling right on them. What was happening was it was a joint big skip. The issues and the tickets were going in, but with no management on them at all. So after 3 months, we were supposed to look at tickets, was the plan. It was there for 3 months. We wanted to aggressively close it, unless it was discussion with a customer who had a feature and there was a discussion with the sales team around what they would pay for it. That never happened. Now, I can say today, and Laura briefly touched on it as well, is that we have addressed that only in the last couple of months, where we have somebody constantly closing tickets for at the moment at a rate of knots. To give you an idea, our sustaining team, which has been since disbanded and joined another team, last September had 1,800 tickets in its backlog and nobody managing it, because we had no product owner at the time, because as Laura said, we lost that battle. We didn't have anybody. Now we do, and Laura will talk about that. So there's false expectations set. So somebody come to you from consultancy. We're one of the few Red Hat offices that have consultancy service in the same building. They'd walk over, as Laura said, to an engineer and say, I created a ticket 4 months ago. Why isn't it done? We had nothing in place. We had no process, no design on how to do it properly, and no person to actually go to and talk. And that caused conflict. This graph shows the real problem. Last April, closed against resolved. As the year went on, it spread. So we weren't resolving anywhere near the quantity of JIRAs that we were creating, and all we were doing was ballooning that backlog. Another one, pull request nightmare, been going on for a while. We all know when we generate code in JIRA, going through our columns, pull requests are formed. They always need to be reviewed, but they're quite manual reviewing them, and that's never going to change on a review. They can be as small as a change to a README file or a big change to code. The person who's reviewing it has different levels of expertise, so the time varies how long it's going to take. But the one thing that killed us was we were merging manually at the time, which meant it was taking us 2 hours because the platform was so big to spin back up Docker containers, everything had to be done manually at the time. So we had a legacy triangle of debt dependency and something that we had to be done about it. This year, okay, it's a little bit of an outlier, but it was one of our biggest releases and one of our longest ones. You can see that we're just short of 500 PRs. That's nearly 1,000 man hours. It's a colossal use of resources. So, this led us to automation. big figures, 363 developer days lost in 1 9 month. Is that right? Okay, cool. All right. So, not only did we lose 363 days in 9 months, our release management was also manual at the time. That meant we took the decision to invest heavily in automation. We got a team of 4, created an automation team, a tooling team, and we gave them 1,000 development days. So they rectified those issues. They're now working on some other automation. But that was only an afterthought. We went through a lot of pain to get to that stage. A lot of resources were wasted. 363 developer days is colossal cost financially and on development time.
Yep. So I'm going to talk about the next phase. So as you can guess from all the stuff that we just talked about and the timeline that we put up, we're talking about a fairly long period here. So I think we started in 2012 at the start of this talk. So what I'm going to talk about now is from December, just gone, basically. So even though it seems a short time, a lot has changed for us in that time. So just to give you some background, in December we started working on a new product. It's still Red Hat Mobile, but it's a different architecture, and it's basically a complete re-architecture. So, and you can find that under AirGear. It's developed in the open under AirGear if you're interested. So with that, we had a complete team reshuffle. So all the teams that we talked about, the 7 previous teams, we've reshuffled all of those. We have 6 teams now, 3 working on the new product, and some other teams. We have a customer success team now instead of the sustaining team. So with that, we kind of took the opportunity to introduce some process change. We also have a dedicated AP. That's me. So this is kind of stuff that I'm really passionate and interested about. I love process. I love organising things. My friends will tell you that I like organising things. So this is a role that I really enjoy, even though I love engineering as well. But I kind of get to do. It kind of touches both really. So couldn't have an Agile presentation without talking about Scrum, right? So this diagram might be familiar to some people. So it's the basic flow of Scrum, how the product backlog feeds into sprint planning, into sprint backlog, the sprint itself with the daily stand-up. You then do the sprint review, and you go into the sprint retrospective. So while we had some of these meetings in the previous iteration, we weren't using them in exactly the right way, and we were also missing this product backlog piece. So we talked about product a lot, but it wasn't product backlog in the Scrum sense. So this was kind of one of the biggest problems that we wanted to solve. So what we did, a couple of things that we've brought in basically since December is we've switched from using story pointing of tasks to time estimation. So we were story pointing for a long time. We were story pointing when I joined the company, and it's in Scrum methodology, story points, it's recommended that you do it at the story level, but not at the task level. Task level would be time estimation. So I had done Scrum Master training, and I was really interested in seeing could we do time estimations. So I did a little investigation into JIRA and how we could manage that in JIRA, and luckily it was the feature was there. So we're trying that out. We've done 1 sprint so far using time estimations. It's gone pretty well. It's still in investigation, so very much in the Agile way. We're taking feedback from the team and tweaking it and improving it where we can. But overall, it's going very well, and I think the team is seeing value in that rather than in story pointing. Another thing we've done since we started in December is a Scrum of Scrums review. So we mentioned all the teams that we had. Now, while we did do the review meetings, they were very much siloed. The team would show their demo to their team and their tech lead, but they would have been sent by email, but still the communication was just a little bit patchy. So We've done one Scrum of Scrum reviews, which is basically, this is specifically for the 5X mobile.next teams. So we have 3 teams which are working on the one product. And so we have visibility across those teams. We're now doing demos with the 3 teams together. We're also looking at centralising retrospectives. So this one actually, I won't say it hasn't started, it's more in a discussion phase than anything. We've only had one sprint, so one retrospective. But what we'd like to do is basically learn from the mistakes. So I mentioned the retrospective earlier, and in some of the teams that I was in before, we completed the sprint retrospective. But the same things kind of came up over and over again, and they came up with other teams, and everyone was kind of trying to solve the same problem, like siloed, or the action items weren't being taken and the problems weren't being solved, and we were just seeing them again and again. So by centralising the items that are coming out of the retrospective, we hope to be able to invest more time in solving them just once rather than by all the teams. So to me, the big piece is the product backlog. So we have the product backlog in Trello. It's owned by our product owner, John at the back there. We're basically doing more planning at a product level. So we still have the product team, but this is more planning from the Scrum perspective. So we're looking at stories in the product backlog. We're prioritising those stories as a team with the product owner, with the Scrum Masters, with our product team, and with our business systems analyst. So we're looking at everything and we're asking that question now: do we want this feature? Is it going to be used? So once that's done, then we're ending up with more productive sprint planning meetings. So once the items are discussed and we have acceptance criteria on the items, the sprint planning actually becomes a lot easier for the team, because the work to be done is much better understood by the Scrum Masters and by the team leads as well. There's also no confusion about, well, what is it that we actually want from this piece of work, because we've all sat down and agreed once these 3, 4, 5 acceptance criteria are done, then this piece of work is as expected. So some other changes that we made, I mentioned it before, Agile Practitioners. So we have we use this term, maybe I should explain this. We use this Agile Practitioner term just because we have Scrum teams and Kanban teams. So instead of saying Scrum Master or Kanban Master, we say Agile Practitioner. So we have one of those now on each team. Unfortunately, not all dedicated, but we would love that. We're also, after reorganising the team in a way that they can develop fully vertically, up the whole stack of the product. So rather than having these isolated pieces that we're trying to then fit together, the one team is responsible for the full vertical. Protecting the teams as well, so there's more communication. We talked about the process not being there in terms of our customer success team needing to support our support team and our consulting team. So there's now a process there. They come through that team, or that's what we would hope anyway. Tooling improvements as well. So we're using Trello now for our product backlog. And so far we're finding that works quite well. It's easy to reorder. There's less... it's much more lightweight, I think, than JIRA. So personally, I think it's working quite well. Other people might disagree. And JIRA as well. So JIRA JIRA is to me like magic, right? There's so much going on in there. But now that I've had some time to investigate into what JIRA can give us, like the time estimations, for example, I think before we looked at the logistics of how that would work in JIRA, it seemed like a really big change to make, because it's like, oh, how do we even do that logistically, right, before even thinking about bringing it to the team? So that takes time as well. Like that really takes a lot of time and a lot of chat with people who really know JIRA really, really well. So that's like a real learning thing for me as well. All of this hopefully moving us towards having alignment across the team, but also autonomy within the team about how they do things. So this is mentioned a lot in Scrum, that the team should have full control over how they're doing things. And this gives the team like a real sense of like controlling their job, you know, and having a sense of, well,
job satisfaction. I get to go and decide what I do every day. But it's really important that the teams are aligned. So we're getting that alignment in the product across the product planning, and then we're getting the autonomy for the team. So the teams really can go off and do it how they want, but the product is still getting done in the way that it should be across the 3 teams. Okay, challenges, right? We can't not talk about challenges. We talked about keeping the retrospective, keeping looking at things that are not going well. So we have had a large amount of change. The teams have changed, the products have changed, the processes are changing. As I've mentioned, we're bringing in a lot. So a bit of fear, uncertainty and doubt within the team, which is completely understandable. We're very much in the J curve. So we definitely took a nosedive with all the changes introduced. The teams are getting familiar with each other, getting familiar with the product, getting familiar with the processes. So we're aware of this. We know this is going to happen. We're happy for it to happen if we can get that spike at the end. So balancing skills as well. So I mentioned about how we want the team to develop in the vertical, and Brendan also kind of alluded to it as well. When teams are changing and they have to work on different things and upskill, reskill, that all takes time. We have to understand that the team needs space to do that. And some false starting issues. Yeah, with everything, it's we didn't expect it to be perfect 100% day one. Some things went wrong, but I think we were conscious of that and tried to just work with it and be okay with it and say, right, okay, we made this mistake, but how can we fix this going forward? I mentioned not all Agile practitioners are dedicated. Personally, I find being in a full-time role, I had done some filling in when I was an engineer, and I found it quite difficult to context switch all the time. There was stuff I wanted to do in the Scrum Master headspace that took so much time and context switch that it was really hard to do both engineering and that. So it's a real pleasure to be able to really deep dive into the stuff that we want to change. Meeting overload at the start. We have a lot of planning meetings because we're starting something new. We want to get a couple of sprints ahead at the strategic product level. So that's just going to take us some time. It's a challenge we're facing. We're dealing with it. We're doing it. Communication. So in an effort to kind of resolve communicating all the changes that we're making, we're kind of going with an over-communicate strategy. So sending out lots of emails. Some of the lads will attest that I send out a lot of emails. Breaking old habits as well. So it's difficult for people to change, when there's fear around doing something new with the product, with the process. So again, it's just time, letting people get used to that, and slow and steady. So lots of stuff. There was lots of stuff there, right? So for I don't know if that seems like a scary amount of change in 1 month to anybody, but we're taking it slow. There's more stuff that I would like to look into and bring in, but I'm trying to do it a change at a time, not scare the hell out of people. So that's where we're at now. Brendan,
So just a quick summary. We got there, but they're moved. We now have 6 Agile teams, as Laura said, a mixture of Scrum and Kanban, 4 Scrum, 2 Kanban. Our speed output is very high, and if you go through the stats in Red Hat, it's actually one of the highest out there at the moment. But the one thing we got to remember about Agile is evolving all the time. It's living, it's breathing. You cannot stand still with Agile, as we did going back a couple of years ago. We are learning to take baby steps and control it a bit better at this stage, as Laura says. We learn to pick and choose our battles a bit better. As it says there, the war is far more important. So meritocracy in Red Hat is always spoken about. It's something we truly, honestly believe in at the moment. And the best idea is not always the one that you're going to agree with, but it's the one that has the betterment of the organisation in mind. So we draw from all those experiences that we learned, both as Agile coaches, conferences, the Agile community within Red Hat, and our local business community as well. Okay, just some final tips. Retrospective, critical, analyse yourself all the time. Don't be afraid to admit you made mistakes. If you actually avoid that part of it, you'll make bigger mistakes further down the line at a greater cost. Invest in automation. Be happy when you hit that wall, because when you hit that wall, you usually find a way around it. Don't be afraid when you do hit that wall. And when you do, document it, blog about it, speak about it. The Agile community is very strong. And even outside of Red Hat, there's big communities at home in Ireland. I'm sure there's big communities here and everywhere else at the moment. Reach out to them. Your mistakes are not unique. Somebody else has made them before you and may be able to help you get over those hurdles. Thank you. Hi.
So you mentioned that, just to see if I understood correctly, you switch it from your teams from story points to time, like task in time.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, the story points are like story pointing is abstract. We were using Fibonacci, so what we found was we were spending a lot of time doing the estimations. So we would do like hour-long backlogs, and we would look to do a minimum of 6 tasks there. But in a sprint, as you can imagine, there was a huge number of tasks. So like the story pointing was taking a lot of time, but it was starting to lose value. I think people were kind of getting a bit jaded with it. So like it didn't really give us an accurate way to plan a sprint. The teams would shift and the story points would be like of no value. Whereas the time estimation, we can look at the team and say, well, we have this many developer days and we have this much time that we want to, this much time of tasks that we want to complete. So it's actually, like so far, I feel it's a more accurate way of estimating how much work you can do in a sprint. Story points were very like abstract.
Okay, so if I can just follow,
Yeah.
You mentioned so accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that you were tracking, like task, meaning so if a task your team is estimating as 10 hours,
Yeah.
you know that because you're tracking that is really around 10 hours and it's not 20, for example.
Yeah, so the...
Can you repeat the question?
Can I repeat the question? Yeah. So the question is it accurate?
Is
the
it
time
accurate in a way that because you are tracking some way that?
Yeah, so the time estimation goes into JIRA, and then the team member who's working on the JIRA is responsible for logging work against it. So it's not to track the work that the person is doing. It's just to give us an idea of how long it's taken us to do work. So I'm not going to say it's accurate right now. We're very, very early into it. So it's going to take us some time as a team to kind of like get good at putting like accurate estimates onto it. That's probably going to take us some time. But it's just more, I think it's just more tangible than a story point. We're not expecting it to be 100% accurate. And it's definitely not like, it's not, we don't want to use it as a, well, you said it'll be 10 hours, but it took longer. Like that doesn't mean that the engineer took too long, it just means that we might have estimated it badly. So it's more about, like we're definitely finding our feet with it. It's not 100% there yet, but I think as a team we just feel it's a bit more tangible than story point. I'm not going to use the word accurate.
I have a question. So, if I understood correctly from your right side, that everybody was happy, right? The developers, management, at some point in time, but customers were not so happy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might ask that one from your end.
That side also.
Yeah.
When we say customers, we include our consultancy and services team as part of our customers as well. So they weren't happy and support weren't happy and some other customers. So what was happening with JIRA when they were creating tickets was the priority wasn't being set right. They weren't being taught there was a process to follow. Mm-hmm. And with nobody managing the backlog, those tickets were sitting in the back of a very large backlog and not getting up to the top. So we've rectified that now with a product owner for each team. They sit down twice a week and they prioritise the backlog. So yeah, the customers did have an issue and did contact us and go, why is it taking so long? If it was a bug, it was different, but it was a small feature request, it was taking a lot longer than it should have.
Yeah. So that happened because you didn't measure something, or
When we created JIRA and we started working with it and all that, one, we had no product owner.
okay.
We were using product owners, myself, other engineers, but we were triplicating jobs on it. The other thing was we never set a process around JIRA. We thought once we gathered everything in JIRA, that was fine. But we never set priority labels, fixed versions. Some of the labeling was wrong because you can relabel them like customer success team, support team, consultancy. So some of those weren't even filled out anywhere along the way. So when you ran a script to pull out information, you were actually losing stuff between the cracks because it wasn't set up properly. It was a mistake we made at the time that we thought we could manage it a bit better, but with the volume, we fell way short.
And how do you know that currently you are on the right track?
Good question. We do have somebody purely employed to go back through the old stuff and run scripts and sit down with support and customer success and see what should be disposed of and what shouldn't. Each team has a product owner, and we have one specific product owner, and her job is to go through all those scripts and all the JIRAs that we pulled out and go through them all and make sure that they're being managed properly. So we have a process in place where everything's labelled properly. Nothing can go to a team without a fixed version, but it has to be done by the product owner. So all of these guidelines have been put in place to protect it all. Up to now, it was a little bit too loose.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Hey.
So basically your whole presentation is a great self-reflection on your work. And at some point you're also mentioning that you are on the ivory tower.
Yeah.
So when was this point, or what helped you to realize you are actually on the ivory tower?
When we been asked to go to conferences and talk, was one of them. But no, in-house and other teams in Red Hat came to us. We outwardly was a success story because our volume was going through the roof. Our quality was remaining the same, or improving in cases of it. So all of these things were significant indicators that things were going well. We were following all the Scrum ceremonies as we taught, but as Laura said, the problem was they became siloed in each team. So we were repeating mistakes across teams. But we thought because we were ticking all the boxes, we had our stand-ups, all our events, retrospectives, we created action points out of retrospectives. But the problem was there was nobody to manage that then. But to us, we've done a retrospective, great, everybody's giving us feedback, got some really valuable stuff off the team, ticked the box, great. The problem was it wasn't being acted upon after that. And this is where the issues arose.
Yeah, I think I can put on my engineering hat and say that some of that stuff was quite frustrating as well. So outwardly, we were working at a high percentage as well. So we would be working really hard, and then you'd see the issues and you'd talk about them and you give the feedback, and if they weren't being resolved, it just became frustrating. So for me, my approach to my role now is if I'm doing something that I know is going to make the team healthier and working in a better environment, then I'm going to work on that. So that's my approach now anyway.
And it looks like we had conflict with a lot of people. We actually get on really well with all those people now.
We have great crack.
There was days it wasn't so well, but we do actually get on well. We have a very good working relationship and environment.
So you mentioned that now you have a product owner, right? So in that sense, I assume he gives the requirements and understands how to prioritize the backlog, correct?
Yeah, he's involved in all the product planning meetings, yeah.
Right now in your team, so we are using some kind of epic user story structure, not only tasks.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of trickiness between Trello and JIRA. So yeah, we're using Trello for stories. So we use the format as a user. I want this so that I can do this. So the cards in Trello are purely in story format, and then an acceptance criteria is added, agreed with the product owner and the other teams, and then we move to JIRA. So there's a little bit of overhead there, and the stories don't work in JIRA as they work as we're using them in Trello. So we use epics in JIRA, but the epic is really a story. It's just under a different name. So there's a little bit of overhead there, but we understand it, and it's working okay so far.
One of the reasons that we actually have Trello, there's two reasons, but one that Laura talked about, the other one was that was part of a compromise with our business units in America. They used Trello even for their waterfall approach. So they'd invested so many years in it. It was a small compromise for us to make. So one of the things we have done is that the QE lads have written a script where we can transfer work from Trello into JIRA quite easily.
Okay, yeah, because in my organization, really, we moved completely from Trello, and we are now only in JIRA. So, and I was just curious how you structure in a Scrum way your backlog. And I'm still thinking about why you're estimating time.
Sorry, repeat the last bit?
No, I'm just still thinking about why you are estimating in time if you have like the user stories and your epics outlined.
Yeah, so the epics or stories are, we story point those. So we story point stories, but the tasks underneath the stories are time estimated. But previously we had been story pointing tasks rather than epics.
Okay. Wouldn't be, I know that it's in the beginning, but wouldn't help the team to self-organize and come out of this, let's say, micromanagement, project management, to give the team some freedom after some time, is that you said it, so they estimating story points, the user stories.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the team do that, yeah.
Yeah, the team does that. And after that, they figure out the tasks.
Yeah.
And you just make sure that the team understands a commitment in I don't know if your team is 2-week sprint or a 4-week sprint.
Yeah.
To what user stories they can do in that sprint, and that's all, and they figure it out how to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly how we are doing it. So the team, the product owner isn't involved at the point where the team are breaking out the stories into tasks. That's up to the team. So they decide how the work is done. Maybe I didn't explain it.
No, yeah, but I would say that in a way you're just trying to micromanage with hours the tasks related to user stories. That, if we think about Agile, if we think about teams that want to become self-organized, and from my teams, I know they just hate even story point estimations.
Yeah.
So I would to ask them, oh, please estimating time, they would.
Well, actually, we did an Agile training course, and what actually happened was, it was actually with the feedback we got from all the developers on the Agile course that first put it in mind that they were the ones who wanted to go on the route of time. I have to say I was surprised. It wasn't something in my previous life I've ever used, but they came back with that feedback. So we felt meritocracy was something that we were going to try.
How people measure the activity in that?
The now or before?
What graph will it change, or the productivity change?
Oh, that's just a standard J curve. So it just shows that when you make a change, like the productivity will drop before you get a decrease in productivity. So that's not specific to us. That's just a general, like with process change. Yeah, you're always going to hit a drop before you see the increase in the productivity. Yeah. I think we're out of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
We're out of time, yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think it was good. I'll stay right here.
But on the side,